Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. It is Monday morning. It is very early. I'm Kevin McPherson. I'm your host again. I want to thank you all for being here. If you're here this early, it's a hearty bunch that comes in this early to talk Arkansas Razorbacks men's basketball. So we appreciate you for doing that. Obviously, if you're hearing this later, that means you found it. You got it off the archive on HogvilleNET YouTube on our channel and checking it out a little bit later in the day. But we've got a few things to get to. We took a couple of days off. Last we were on was Friday. Here we are moving into the last week of June effectively. So we wanted to reach out and kind of go through some things that are, I think important right now as we start looking ahead now that the baseball season's over, the NBA season's over. We're going to wrap up talking about some pro hogs and some pro Caliparis that picked up titles late last night. Kevin, you slide dog, good morning. Well, that's one way of putting it. I'm a little more aerodynamic. I got a much needed haircut on Friday, so I'm a little more aerodynamic. Good morning, Kevin. Great morning for some hoops talk. That's right. And as we get into this, it's something that kind of caught my eye, obviously, on Saturday when I see Carter Knox on his Instagram account posting a photo inside the Basketball Performance Center up there in Fayetteville, right across the street from Bud Walton Arena. And he's got it pinned that he's in Fayetteville. It's kind of been in and out here. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But this is a situation when I look at the roster and how important he is to it. It's not that we were worried about his availability. It was just more like, it's been almost a month since he announced late May that he was going to withdraw from the NBA draft and return to Arkansas. Yet it took a couple more weeks after the team had already moved on campus to everybody else. Took a couple more weeks for him to arrive. There was even a team photo in the Basketball Performance Center with Calipari, no Carter Knox. That's when we first saw Amir Brown, the walk-on out of Pittsburgh, freshman, buddies with Malik Thomas, the freshman five-star guard. No Carter Knox, and that was a few weeks ago. And then Knox arrives on campus. We did see him in a photo from one of Calipari's satellite camps, youth camps. I believe it was the Russellville camp maybe, or Alma, one of those. So we did see him pictured there. And then we learned a few days later that he was back off campus. He got a multiple day respite and was able to, I guess, go home or go wherever he needed to go for a while. But then again on Saturday, you see this post on his Instagram account. And the reason I bring this up and I lead with this is because maybe no one's more important in the retention part of it. And the retention's been important, all four players, but I think he might be at the top of that list. And he's arguably your centerpiece coming into this season when you look at your roster. I think I've mentioned it before. I think Darius Acuff Jr., the true freshman guard coming in, has that kind of, that he's just got that aura about him that could be your leading scorer, could be a first team all league kind of guy. Those type of things projecting ahead as possibilities. Carter Knox in the same vein in terms of the all league value, being the centerpiece of your program. And so you're glad that, he's posting that he's back in Fayetteville. But it got me to thinking, as we've talked so much lately about Arkansas still looking actively pursuing to fill the 15th and final piece of this roster. I don't think they're finished yet. And we talked about the fact that last year's walk-on, one of the walk-ons, Aiden Kelly, has been seen in a lot of the camp photos. And the most recent roster photo, team photo that came out, again, no Carter Knox. That was right before the weekend when we see that Carter Knox returned. So the second photo that Calipari put out with basically the team in the Performance Center, no Carter Knox, but we've been seeing Aiden Kelly, including that most recent photo, yet he's not on the roster. He's pictured with the coaches in that cluster of people in the photo, not the actual players. We kind of think of him as right now maybe like a manager on the team, student manager, until we see what results for that 15th and final roster spot. Because I believe if they don't go in another direction to fill that spot, he'll end up being back as part of the team and being that 15th guy. Remember, Arkansas had all 15 roster spots filled last year, even though the true two deep only went 9 players. This time around, it looks like an 8 deep as it is now. And that's why I think they're still actively pursuing someone, maybe a veteran out of the international play, perhaps a really high level 5-star kind of guy that's in the class of 2026 that might reclass later. Maybe even someone still thinking about a transfer. There's still players that are out of the portal that haven't, I mean, not anybody that you're looking at in terms of a splash, anything odd that can out of school, which has happened in players later. So you don't know where it might be coming from, but we went through all that to come back to Carter Knox to say, you know, assuming Arkansas is still looking for a depth piece to get to a true 9-player, 2 deep rotation, because I think some of the recent ads, I've mentioned this again, in Elmir Javich and Paulo Semedo, I look at those two frontline guys as maybe more developmental. We still think Isaiah Seeley may have the best case to play and plug in as needed outside that top 8 rotation, who I think will have a regular role and regular kind of minutes allocation. When you look at it from that standpoint, as we think about Arkansas still adding a piece, you're glad that Carter Knox is back on campus, because he was always one at the end when you were holding your breath to see who was going to come, if he was going to come back out of the draft, what you were really going to have to pursue and add. And it just brings us back to the idea of Arkansas doesn't have to be feeling like they're in an emergent situation to add anybody. They may not add anybody. They may stand pat. Remember, Calipari and his staff have said, and they've told me it's got to make sense. It's less is more, but it just seems obvious to me that they're still in the hunt for somebody. But we go back to Knox as I started thinking about this SEC schedule that came out, and we went through that a few days ago because it came out just a few days ago, and we had a segment here midweek where we just kind of went through all 18 matchups. We don't know the playing dates, times, or television designations yet, but we know who they're playing and how often and where. And I kind of mentioned at the time, the headliners are you're getting Kentucky in a one-off. I mean, we know it's going to be an addition to that SEC slate, 18 games, and how good the league is going to be again. We've seen the non-conference matchups, the big ones leaked out or have come out, or Calipari's leaked them out slowly but surely. And we know there are 6 high majors now in the fold. And again, when you cobble the non-conference with the SEC games, you're looking at Arkansas playing the entire Elite Eight from last season, plus a couple of more teams in Kentucky and Ole Miss that advanced to the Sweet 16. And you're playing Auburn twice. You got 11 games against 10 opponents that made up last year's Sweet 16. And most of those teams are going to be preseason ranked, if not all of them. And you look at John Rossi, and that's the rankings I keep referring to for now, because he updates it sometimes daily, and he updated it on Sunday. But you look at, I'm going to focus on the Arkansas-Kentucky matchup, because I still think that is the headline game. That is the game of games coming into the season. It may not end up being the most important game. It may not, in terms of how, we don't know when it'll be played yet. There may be a game where Arkansas and the opponent are both ranked higher, so there are ways that we'll be able to frame this when we actually go through the schedule and things actually play out, where you look back and say, well, was Kentucky really the biggest game? It was the biggest game last year, not because Calipari it was his return to Rupp after being the head coach there for 15 consecutive years. But it's also the fact that it really kind of turned Arkansas' season around that game. If you remember, Arkansas was 1-6 in league play on the road to Kentucky. You pick that up. Then you go on the road and you beat Texas in a close game. And now you kind of got things going again. And you're on a path now to actually, stamping your way into the NCAA tournament. But it started really in Lexington. So when we look at it, from 30,000 feet this far away in June, I still think Arkansas-Kentucky is the marquee matchup for the Razorbacks next season until some other game proves that it was more important. And now Mark Pope and Kentucky's old program get to come to Bud Walton Arena in a one-off. And, it'd be one of those games where the atmosphere is going to be wild. The students will camp out for days. The place will be packed. I'm sure Arkansas is really hoping when the schedule does get finally released in terms of playing dates, that's going to be a weekend to Saturday game, because you can bring in recruits. You can get, you can build the anticipations even more escalated when it's not a weekday game, and you're got people that have to work and figure out getting up there and back. I mean, it just makes it easier for everybody to really focus on that playing date. So you hope it's a Saturday. But all those things being said, and going back to the Carter Knox aspect of it, when I think about Carter, I think about the guy not only that could be Arkansas centerpiece for this next roster, but I also think about someone that's got a chance to be Arkansas's best two-way player, offense and defense. When you look at it from that standpoint, he may not end up being the leading scorer, or he might, but when you combine what he can do at both ends, he might be on a path to being Arkansas's best two-way player. Last year, as it turned out, even though this wasn't a highly leveled skill guy, it was a Adu Thero. He was Arkansas's leading scorer. He was their most versatile defender. He led the team in rebounding. He led the team in steals. The best two-way player on the team, when you look at it from that standpoint, I think Carter Knox is maybe next man up. And so as my wheels are turning, I'm thinking the impact of this game. Who did Kentucky lost a lot? They didn't have the retention that Arkansas had. When you look at the four that Arkansas brought back, Kentucky's bringing back four as well. But only one of those guys is really a standout. And it was a guy like Carter Knox that, dipped out of the NBA draft and came back to school. Otega Owe, a 6'4" wing, not as big as Carter at 6'6", but one of the best two-way players last year, an all-league performer in the SEC. Both programs make it to a Sweet 16. We know what happened in the head-to-head. But to me, that's the matchup. It starts with Carter Knox and Otega Owe. Now, by the time we get there, they may be other players for both teams that have really emerged, and we're talking as much about, if not more. But just looking at it from here, this is the first matchup I want to talk about, because we talked about the schedule and who the matchups were, but I wanted to bring in more of the deep dive into what do the matchups look like. So Carter Knox and Otega Owe, these are going to be arguably two of the best players in the SEC by that time, knocking heads at that wing spot. So that's probably the biggest matchup when I look at that. The next biggest matchup that intrigues me are the front line pieces. You look at Arkansas returning Trevor Brazile. If he's anywhere near what he was the last 9 games, the way he was playing, Malik Ewan, who we think is going to be a strong rebounder and a plus on offense, better offensively consistently than any frontline piece Arkansas had last year. And then Nick Pringle, who's been an enforcer in the SEC for years. You look at that front line, and what stood out to me last year, as good as Amari Williams was in that game, in that matchup at center, more of a finesse player, a guy that's, using his soft skills more than he is using his frame to move people around. Now, he had success against Arkansas partly because at that point in the season, it was Big Z who was still mainly your featured guy inside. He hit 4 threes in that game in Rupp, by the way, in starting role. And Jonas Adu and Trevor Brazile weren't quite who they were late in the year in terms of what their value was. So Williams had one of those games, but outside of him, there really wasn't a lot inside. In fact, throughout that roster on Kentucky, that brought a physical element, that brought a toughness element, and I thought that was advantage Arkansas in that game. And that's why Arkansas wins by 10 on the road, 89-79, was just Arkansas could play more bully ball and could get its drive game going against a sort of a finesse team. But I look at this front line for Arkansas, and I look across the way, and I see Mark Pope has addressed that toughness element on his front line. He's got Brandon Garrison back, who was a backup last year and played in that Arkansas-Kentucky game. Obviously, he's back. But the key are the additions, and I think Quaintance, who signed with Calipari to Kentucky in his last high school class, was not one of the players. Jaden Quaintance, 6'9", 6'10", forward, McDonald's All-American, that came to Arkansas with Calipari, ended up at Arizona State. He had a knee injury late in the year, had surgery for that knee injury, expected to be ready, full go, cleared by the fall, but we'll see what his, how long it takes him to really reacclimate to the college game and be who he was. But we're talking about a game like last year was played in early February, so you got to think if he makes a full recovery, he's going to be full speed by the time Arkansas faces Kentucky. But here is a player who is a rim protector, a big volume rebounder, and he can play a physical game. It's much different than what Kentucky had on its front line last year. Muhammad Diabate, who gave Arkansas fits in Fayetteville with that Alabama team, by the way, that went to the Elite Eight after a Final Four the year before. He's also transferred in. He'll be at the 4 spot projected. Sort of an undersized 4, 6'6", 6'7", but man, he's active. And he doesn't mind physicality. He's not the biggest dude in the world, but he likes physicality around the basket. He plays well through contact. So the matchup on the front line, I think, advantage Arkansas still. I'm going to give Arkansas the nod here, but it might be closer than it was last year in terms of overall toughness for Kentucky relative to what they were last year. And so, it makes sense why Pope made some of these ads. He wanted to get better on that front line. So that'll be a fascinating matchup. I look in the backcourt, of course, Darius Jacob Jr., DJ Wagner, Malik Thomas, going up against guys like Jalen Lowe, the transfer from Pitt, lead guard. Kentucky had lead guard issues last year because of injuries. They had, their main lead guard out when Arkansas played him. You saw Jackson Robinson, who was playing with an injured wrist, the former Hog, and really a wing trying to play the one. Amari Williams was the big man, was playing, kind of lead center, point center. And that was also maybe part of Kentucky's problems that night. But you look at Jalen Lowe, Denzel Aberdeen, the fourth guard in the lineup, first one off the bench for the Florida Gators national championship team last year. I expect he'll be in a starting role at Kentucky. Jasper Johnson, the talented freshman guard. So when you look kind of at the backcourt, a lot of question marks for both teams because you got a lot of newcomers. In terms of Kentucky, when I just went through those 3 names, those are going to be first-year players in the backcourt for the Wildcats, whereas DJ Wagner is back for year 3 under Calipari in his second season at Arkansas under Calipari. So those are some of the positional groups. When I look at the game last year, it was an anomaly for Arkansas because the Razorbacks were, I think, 52% from 3. They made 13 threes. That was kind of what Kentucky did. Arkansas made 2 or 3 more threes than Kentucky, shot it a whole lot better. Big Z hit 4. Nelly Davis hit 3 of those. Those guys are gone. Adu Thero had 21 points and 8 rebounds. Even he knocked down a 3. He's gone. And he had that bully ball element. It was kind of an enforcer at both ends. You don't have him. You kind of think, well, Carter Knox, again, may end up being that kind of guy for Arkansas to a lesser degree maybe, but maybe that kind of role for him, especially in this matchup. But it was a game where Arkansas was able to play at the pace that Kentucky wanted to play at and play better. Arkansas was better defensively again and was shooting lights out from 3. Arkansas won the turnover game as well. It was a low turnover game for Arkansas relative to some of the problems that team had through the season in some of its biggest games, especially when it was a self-inflicted wounds and we'd see it kind of add up. So everything worked that night. Players were fired up. 3 guys returning that had been in the Kentucky uniform that year. Little different dynamic. Of course, DJ's back after, he's one guy that did play for Cal at Kentucky, like I said. But I think advantage Arkansas not only playing at home, more retention. When you look at Brazil, Knox, Billy Richmond III, who played only 10 minutes. It was really before he started getting more and more playing time as the attrition started to add up and he got better as the season moved along down to the final third of league play. Trevor Brazil only played 11 minutes. He knocked down a 3 in that game in Rupp, by the way. Again, advantage Arkansas because of the retention. Got 2 names I didn't mention that did return with Kentucky because I've already mentioned Owe and Brandon Garrison. Colin Chandler, who played about 17 minutes, a forward who can shoot. He played about 17 minutes of the game last year. Noah Trent, who played quite a bit for Kentucky at times because of injuries, did not play in the game in Rupp last year, but he's also returned, and he may factor in somewhere. Kentucky's going to be a team that will run as many as 10 deep with no problem, and they've recruited that way when you look at how many players they brought in. Arkansas right now, to me, still a true 8 deep. Again, the 2 new additions on the front line, I still think they're more developmental than predicting some kind of a playable depth role. We'll see what happens as it moves along. Maybe it'll be different at some point, or maybe Arkansas does actually add another piece. All right, so I'm not going to predict who's going to win here in June. We don't know about injuries. We don't know about a lot of things just yet. But Arkansas will be battle tested regardless heading into SEC play because of playing those 6 high majors. Many of them, three, at least half of them will probably be ranked preseason top 10 in the country. When you look at Houston, Duke, and Texas Tech, and then you've got Louisville and Michigan State, probably going to be preseason ranked. Baylor, probably not. But you're playing some of that at home, some at neutral site, at least one on the road against Michigan State. And a lot of those games will be played in December as a ramp up to league play. So by the time you play Kentucky again, who knows where it falls on your schedule. But Arkansas may do better out of the gates in league play. And then again against Kentucky, I give the advantage to Arkansas being at home, more retention. And I think Arkansas's best 8 are better than when I look at some of these names I mentioned here. I think Arkansas's top 8 are better than Kentucky's top 8, even though the Wildcats may go a little deeper. All right, we are 21 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. We're going to be brief on some of this other stuff this morning. And really, what we're going to get down to is what Calipari's weekend. Mentioned Carter Knox putting out the IG announcement that he was back with the photo inside, or I guess it was inside his locker room inside the Performance Center with his nameplate at the top of his locker. And so Calipari also had a big weekend. He had a 39th wedding anniversary. He and his lovely bride, Ellen, he put out several tweets referencing that during the weekend. But remember, we told you going into the weekend in our most recent segment, he was going to be on the road in Kansas City, which he did. He did go through with that. I wondered about that, because he had the anniversary, but he did make it on Friday, and he was there to check out 3 that I'm able to name. J.J. Andrews, the future Hog, already committed, was participating in this Midwest Showcase. It's high school team camp, so he was there with this Little Rock Christian Academy team participating. Calipari was courtside to watch him, as well as another 2026 wing, Jalen Montnati, out of Owasso, Oklahoma, 6'7" wing sharpshooter. This guy's a sniper. His team was also playing in this same event in Kansas City, and Calipari was there to see him, as he was there to see another, maybe the next name in Arkansas in-state basketball, Anthony Spratt Jr., a 6'5" guard wing out of Benton, helped Benton as a freshman to a 5A state title. And so Benton also obviously played in this same Midwest Showcase live eval event, and Calipari was there to see him Friday night. Saturday morning, he was still in town. He was watching JJ play. Saturday was actually the day of his anniversary. I think that was the actual date. And I guess that was the 21st. And Calipari was tweeting about that. And at some point, I guess he got back to Fayetteville, maybe later that day after doing the live eval stuff. But what was interesting was on Sunday, Calipari puts a tweet out about how well practice went. He said, "We had a great practice." And then he talked about some of the stuff he was doing with his wife to celebrate their 39th anniversary. He bought her flowers. They walked the dog. Then he found out she attended practice that day. They had a great practice. Attended practice in the afternoon, and she found out he found out he had a ticket for the Game 7 of the NBA Finals, and his wife said, "Yeah, you need to go." So he did that. So I always talk about how recruiting is not just about the present, but it's about both the future and the past. And the weekend is a perfect example. Here's the head hog. He's got his anniversary with his wife, and he's on the road recruiting the future class of 2026, even an in-state 28 kid who made sure he was courtside to put eyes on. And we talked about Spratt and his game and all that. But by the end of the weekend, he's there at Sunday night to last night to be there courtside to see the pro Caliparis, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, regular season MVP, the scoring champion in the NBA this year, and now the finals MVP. The Thunder winning by 12 points on their home court in Game 7. It's the first title for that organization in the city of Oklahoma City. They've been there a couple of decades or more. Previously were the Seattle Supersonics, and that organization won a title back in the late 70s. So technically, if it's the same organization, it's the second title, but the first one in OKC. But he was there to see SGA, Cason Wallace, who just played for him not that long ago at Kentucky, I guess 3 years ago. And then obviously the Pro Hogs, Isaiah Joe and Jalen Williams. we'll talk a little bit more about that. But it was a busy weekend for him. But circling full circle back to Carter Knox, the fact that Knox is posted on his IG account on Saturday that he's back, and we know they had a great practice on Sunday. I'm guessing Carter Knox was part of that great practice. And I go back to the original point when we started talking about Carter, as we also look at Arkansas trying to continue to maybe fill the roster. They didn't immediately go to the on-court instruction and the 8 hours per week official stuff on court, where you get 4 of those for on-court instruction and coaching, the other 4 strength and conditioning, and then everything outside of that's just voluntary. You go into the performance center on your own, or maybe with teammates, and get up shots, work out, play pickup ball. Maybe you do some weight training on your own, but you get 8 that's organized and mandated, that's allowed by the NCAA. But Arkansas didn't hit the ground running once summer session 1 started. They took time getting their physicals. And we talked about on one of these segments, it's kind of smart maybe to do that if you're still trying to backfill the roster, and then get Carter Knox back on his time frame. And it just took a little bit for that. But we do know now that practice has started. They weren't going for the first couple of weeks, but that's okay, because that gives them more practice time now with guys coming back, including a Knox late, adding 2 new pieces. We'll see when these international guys, one of them technically in high school last year here in Florida, here in the United States in Florida, we'll see when they're added to the roster and when they're actually in town. But the late start allows for guys that are straggling and coming in later to get more of them on the court. And it's just good to hear that Calipari framed practice time as great this on Sunday, and we believe then Carter Knox was in there as well. And so, kind of looking at all of that now, moving ahead, our eyes are sharply on who they might still add. I started out talking about that. We're going to really be drilling down, working on that, and digging on behind the scenes to try to bring to you on these upcoming episodes where this might be headed and who it might be headed toward. And real quick, congratulations to Isaiah Joe and Jalen Williams. Neither player played last night. Isaiah Joe played in every playoff game, all 4 rounds, excluding 2 games, the 5th and 7th game of these NBA finals. Both Isaiah and Jalen played briefly in a couple of games, I believe, in the finals. But both were in the 2 deep rotation, the second unit rotation, at various times in these playoffs. We know they certainly were important in the regular season and helping Oklahoma City have the best record in the NBA. One of only 7 teams ever to win 68 games or more in a regular season. They set a bunch of standards and records along the way, unprecedented things, even matched up and stacked up against some of the greatest teams of all time. And now they've put a championship with everything that led to it. So this will go down in history as one of the best NBA teams of all time. But Isaiah Joe and Jalen Williams had a big part in that. Isaiah Joe, first season, that year 5 in the NBA, his first season to finish a season averaging double-figure scoring average, 10.2 points per game. All 3 seasons in Oklahoma City since he's been there, he shot 41% or better from the 3-point line on really high volume. And when you really break it down based on the minutes he plays, if he had more of a starter value, when you look at minutes and usage, his volume and percentage is elite and among the best in the NBA. And he had his moments in these playoffs. He scored in double figures in every series in the playoffs, in at least 1 game, and a total of 5 times. And he shot over nearly 42% from 3 in the playoffs on a good clip relative to the few minutes he was getting. And he averaged, I think in the first series against Memphis, 8.5 points. This last series, the championship series, nearly 5 points per game. And again, he got rotation minutes in top rotation minutes in every series, even if it was brief and not every game. And Jalen Williams, his defensive work against the Joker in the Western Conference semifinals, he had some big stretches. That series went 7 games, and some of those games were close and could have gone either way than when Oklahoma City won. And he had some big moments defending the Joker and doing some other things when he was on the court. Again, both of those guys played abbreviated minutes for the most part, but those minutes were important. And now they're champions, and it gives Arkansas their 4th and 5th NBA champions in the last 5 years. Bobby Portis and the Milwaukee Bucks, the best 6 man in the NBA. And it started really that year, first year in Milwaukee back in 2020-21, NBA champs. The following season, Moses Moody is a rookie with the Golden State Warriors. And what was a dynasty, their most recent title in 2021-22. So Mo got a ring as a rookie. Skip over a season, I think it was Denver beating the Miami Heat in the 22-23 NBA Finals. So no Pro Hogs there. But last season, 23-24, you had Jordan Walsh. He was on the 15-man roster. No, he didn't have a rotation role, but he did get a ring with the Boston Celtics, beating the Dallas Mavericks. And at the time, Daniel Gafford, as a starting center, played in the finals, didn't get a championship ring. But now Isaiah Joe and Jalen Williams winning championship rings again in 24-25 to wrap up the season. That's big time. And so you've got, again, 5 Pro Hogs to win rings in the last 5 years, plus a 6th Pro Hog in Dan Gafford to play in a finals in that same stretch. This is a great run, and it's important. This goes even more to why when we look at what Calipari did this weekend recruiting in Kansas City, and then he's in Oklahoma City for the finals. All of this is part of not only his brand, but the brand that he sells in recruiting. And so anytime you think, well, why do we talk so much about the Pro Hogs? Why so much? Because it's important. It's a reflection of your program and the strength of it. And again, when you talk past, present, and future, it all matters. And Calipari gets it as well, if not better than anybody in the game. It's why he's active on social media, and it's why he makes appearances where it's necessary. Again, the greatest to do it all time in recruiting, and he understands that this is part of the branding. All right, we're going to sign off nearly 32 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Hope you have a great week. Get it started off with an early Monday. Let's talk hoops. We did that. We've got the NBA draft coming up later this week. So tomorrow's show, I'm going to focus on Adu Thera, what the mock drafts are saying, what some of my contacts, some of my scouts and NBA draft gurus are telling me behind the scenes. We're going to talk more recruiting and identify some things to keep an eye on. I told you we're going to really try to drill down on what Arkansas is trying to do to finish out this roster with a 15th man. But until next time, now if something important breaks later today, which I don't expect, but if it does, we're going to come back on live. If not, it'll be tomorrow, and it'll be early again, most likely. If not, 5:30 in the morning, have to be after 7 p.m., 7:30 p.m. at night. So probably be back on the morning. Until then, thank you for being here. We appreciate all of you. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon.